Welcome. In our journey of Indian writing in English, let's now focus on a major portion of writing which is also treated as diaspora writings. And it's very important to look at it because we see a large number of Indian English writers writing from centers outside of India, and then we know their names, and many of them go on to achieve international acclaim and fanfare and celebrity status itself. Like one of the major achievers of this era and time would be Salman Rushdie and his monumental work Midnight Children. But besides Rushdie, there are like other writers who are also part of this entire constellation, like Bharti Mukherjee, Meena Alexander, Amitav Ghosh, Agha Shahid Ali, Bikram Seth, Suniti Nam Joshi, Chitra Divakaruni Banerjee, Amit Chaudhary. We can take many more, Rohinton Mistry, Bapsi Sidhwa. We have many more names that we can take under this group of writers who are writing from outside of India. If you remember, we actually started with a writer who could be in this way categorized as diasporic. That will be Dean Mohammed. Because he was writing from outside of India. So from late 18th century, we have reached post 1960s, where we start seeing these kinds of writings come up, and we'll read some of the samples from them, and we'll also try to grapple with many of the issues that come up thanks to writers writing from locations outside India. And they bring out many issues, complications, and also complexities that go on to characterize Indian writing in English. And like from 19th century onwards, we see, especially in the final decades of 19th century, we see that the migration towards North America and Europe by Indians who go on seeking jobs and professional careers, and that leads to very interesting sociologies, obviously, where we have educated Indian men and women who go on to pursue careers and settle down abroad, and they also participate in the discourses that are there at this point of time in the global West or the global North. Well educated, professionally successful, financially secure diasporic Indians constitute a network of anglicized, Europeanized and westernized men and women scattered across the globe, and they experience a kind of gap from India, yet there are certain and significant links that they experience. So this kind of a fragmentation, yet a interlinked community characterizes the diaspora first, and then it produces many of the Indian English writers. As I said, you can think about n number of writers that I mentioned right now, and you will see that they are part of this kind of a migration. Many of them also go on to marry and settle down there. One should at this point be aware that this group of writers, even though there are certain characteristics that are there which are common to many of them, just like as I mentioned that many of them have gone for better opportunities, many of them had migrated, and many of them are like anglicized. This group, however, is not a homogenized group, because if we remember the history of if we remember the history of this diaspora, they they are formed thanks to various different kinds of interactions with colonialism. For example, Indian origin of people are there in almost around 130 countries, according to an estimate. And diverse relationships these Indian immigrants have to India itself, because for example, if you look at the Indian immigrants in Fiji and Malaysia, who were there because of who were taken as to be laborers in the colony itself, who go on to then constitute a sizable portion of that country, and their successive generations have a very different relationship with India or Indian languages themselves. And this kind of a relationship differs significantly to other Indians or counterparts who are living in, let's say, Australia, New Zealand, America, the United States, or Canada, or Europe, Western Europe itself. And their attitudes might differ from the ones that are there in the Caribbean. So, one then sees a spectrum of writers geographically divided across the globe. So that's one of the first things that one needs to think about, that not all of them go or migrate to other countries under similar circumstances. So that's why the diaspora is not a homogeneous entity. So that's one of the first things one needs to remember. The second thing that one needs to remember is this, what I started with, that they have a fragmented yet an interlinked community with India itself. So we all know about movies that go on to become big hits in the United States, especially Hindi movies at the late 20th century and early 21st century. We see a huge amount of diasporic crowd which went on to watch those movies, and there were movies that were made according to what is called the NRI sensibilities. So you will see that in those movies also, if you look at famous Yash Raj movies or any other movies, you see a fragmented self which has benefited from the sophisticated and good life of abroad, of the foreign soil, and has made good use of the opportunities that they get. Yet they feel a certain kind of detachment yet attachment towards India, that there is a call towards home, that this sense of home, that it's not there, it's there. One lives with those kinds of tensions, and those tensions are explored in many of these writers. So that's why home becomes a very important concept for these diasporic writers. Uh, uh, Many of them go on to think of the countries that they have settled in as homes, yet there is a nagging feeling that probably this is not home. Home is somewhere else. So that kind of a gap leaves the diasporic writers and the diasporic subjects in a liminal space. Soja has the concept of the third space, which has been used very productively by many of the scholars on on diaspora and diasporic writings. Those who are interested in those kinds of work may read up more in those lines. However, this lecture is supposed to give you a brief overview of those commonalities which plague and characterize the diasporic writings itself. As I said, one supposed to know that like there is a very strong sense of home. The idea of the nation becomes again very complex for them. Which nation do they belong to? What is their nation? What becomes their imagined community? all of these notions become very important for writers who are writing from such centers. One gets to see these much more productively in, as I said, Midnight Children, where the writer goes on a tour of the subcontinent almost. In that sense, you have the central character who is born at the stroke of midnight, as they say. That's why the Midnight Children has very becomes the chronicler of the independent nation. So, nation, history are interlinked through these characters. So, many of these characters become vehicles of the nation and history itself. So, thereby one can start seeing, as I said, many commonalities. The first is a concern for home, the second is an idea of nation, third being history, and then because these spaces, for example, let's say a space like United States of America or Canada or let's say England, where many of these South Asian countries come together, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the undivided India pre 1947, you also start seeing, and because this is being written around 1970s and everything, so the generation which is writing it also had a concept that of undivided India. So, what you start seeing is that their participation with the larger subcontinent. So, that's why you will have characters from the subcontinent who have gathered in these places, which are in that sense a third space. They are not like, let's say, India or Pakistan or Bangladesh, and they are all put together under the rubric of Indian. These are talking about Indian realities. For example, a writer like Salman Rushdie, who never held an Indian passport, also gets categorized as Indian because he is writing about Bombay. And significantly about Bombay itself, right? So thereby you also look at the heterogeneity, the problematic notion of home, the idea of nation and history together, and many of these, many of what comes under this idea of Indian also have to be qualified because they do not form strictly under the national boundaries. We kind of see a international space emerging, a certain kind of cosmopolitanism, where these subjects mingle with each other and are have very strong social cultural bonds with each other because they can recognize the similar kind of attitudes towards, let's say, food, towards towards festivities. The celebration is of a similar kind, the attitude towards life is of a similar kind, and that's why they come together. So that's why you will see certain bonds being enacted between, let's say, an Indian and a Pakistani or an Indian and a Bangladeshi, whereas at home in, let's say, India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, or the subcontinent in general as a larger entity, they do not share such cordial relationships. So a new kind of sociality emerges, a new kind of sensibility emerges, and a new way of living almost emerges in these spaces. And these writings that emerge out of these kinds of spaces embrace that inclusivity, embrace many of these many of these diversities, and bring to us those worlds which then problematize our understanding of nation and history itself, and that goes on to also probably give a message of inclusivity and universality beyond the boundaries of nation itself. Like there is a conscious attempt in many of these writings to go beyond the nation itself, to not really think about their writings in terms of national boundaries. So that's another way to think about it. The other way to also think about it is also to look at the positions and the status of these many of these writers. Many of these writers obviously come from similar backgrounds. They are almost uniform in terms of their affiliation, and have and they unlike many of the writers of the 1930s or the 60s, their writings and many commentators have commented on their elitist nature of this kind of writing, the diasporic writing, that unlike the 30s and 60s, which was deeply enmeshed and had a social realist, anti-elitist element in them, and a concern for the marginalized, as you would have seen in the poems that we dealt with and the writings of R.K. Narayan that we dealt with. You see a concern for the marginalized, the anti-elitist that is there, the writings coming from very different parts of India. The writings from diaspora seem very elitist, and that's been a charge that has been leveled against them. Many, in contrast to, let's say, the social commitment of Mulk Raj Anand, Adil Jusawala, Arun Kolatkar, the attitudes of, let's say, these writers like Bharati Mukherjee, Chitra Banerjee, Aga Shahid Ali, Shashi Tharoor, Amit Chaudhary, Salman Rushdie, Amitav Ghosh, even to a certain extent, according to many of these commentators, seem very elitist and bereft of a commitment towards what their 1930s and 60s predecessors did even. The shift in class alignment is very visible. If you look at post from 1925 to 75 and post 75 in that sense, the diasporic writing swerves away from the realities of the subcontinent. One reason may be this complicated relationship with home and the idea of nation. It kind of swerves away from the realities, and constantly we see a factor of nostalgia, that it's always almost in a nostalgic remembrance of what home was, what our nation was, what history, and a deep investment that therefore in history itself. They reject realistic representations in favor of magic realism and discursive constructionism, as Vinay Dharwadkar. He even implies that there is a certain kind of exoticization and a kind of a escapism from social realism, social injustice itself, and they are more focused on the aesthetics and the formal discourses itself. So one can see that the diasporic writing then presents certain opportunities as well as problems. As I said, diasporic writing in a way, like when Salman Rushdie is feted and felicitated for his monumental book Midnight Children, the limelight on Indian writing in English is unmatchable, and that has been a complaint also from the Bhasha writers, that look, the kind of writing that gets to represent India outside India does not match with the image of India itself, does not match, and many of the Bhasha writers have openly criticized many of these writers because their image or their characterization of India is exoticized. And many of them have also commented on this, that because of English, the kind of prominence that they get is something that is lacking for the Bhasha writers, simply because they know, because these English writers, these diasporic writers, hailing from metropolitan centers of the world where the publishing and the knowledge economy exists, take advantage of it and represent India in a way that the West wants to see India. So, in a way, they feed the image of India that the West wants to see, and therefore their books sell more. Not because they are representing India properly. So, many of the Bhasha writers have traded these charges. The Indian English writers also have their own defenses that they are presenting India in a very nuanced way. Just because they are writing from their memory, it does not make them or because they are writing from outside of India does not make them liable to these charges, as Rushdie will later see. Will go on to argue that it's the quality of the work, it doesn't matter where it's coming from or who's writing in that sense, that should matter. But these charges are there, these celebrations of Indian English writings are there. It's actually diasporic writing which brings Indian English to a certain center stage. Beneficiaries of this are today's writers also in English from India, who are able to write and command an audience and a readership in English today. So therefore, the diasporic writing from India presents to us very interesting dynamics that need to be paid attention to, and in our chronological survey we have reached that space of 1970s where we can look at this kind of a diasporic writing. In the next lectures we will have a look at two short stories, one by Jhumpa Lahiri and the other by Rohinton Mistry, before we go on to look at an essay by Salman Rushdie, which will detail many of these theoretical problems in an essay called Commonwealth Literature Does Not Exist.